If you're trying to win over your toxic manager, you've already lost. That's the part people don't want to accept. They think the solution is better communication, more alignment, more effort, more patience. It isn't. The core mistake is thinking that this is a performance problem that you can control. It's not. It's a perception problem. And perception, once it locks in, is extremely hard to change. So we need to break the illusion here. How to survive a toxic manager without quitting sounds like a strategy. It's not. It's a constraint. Because honestly, if you could leave, you would have already. So now you're stuck managing someone who controls your time, your workload, and your reputation. That last part is the real leverage they have. Not your tasks, not your output, your narrative. And most people respond the same way. They get emotional. They push back. They withdraw. They start documenting everything like they're building some sort of legal case. This feels smart, but it usually makes things worse because toxic managers don't respond to fairness. They respond to friction, and friction is expensive. The moment you become difficult, even if you're right, you become a problem to manage, not a person to support. That's the shift. And once that shift happens, your performance is no longer the main variable. Your manageability is. And that's the real scorecard. This is where people get this wrong. They think if they prove they're right, they'll win. But we're in a system that's rewarding something else. The system is rewarding ease. The system is rewarding low risk. It's rewarding people who do not create additional work for their toxic managers, even if that manager is wrong, even if that manager is inconsistent, and even if that manager is really unfair. That's the system you're in. And here's the part people avoid saying out loud. Sometimes your manager just doesn't like you. There's no fix. There's no conversation. That just is. And that decision might have happened early on, before you understood the game. I had a manager tell me more than once that they didn't care what I thought. They didn't imply it. They said it to me directly. I do not care what you think. So, at least the situation was clear. At one point, this manager even told HR that I didn't show up to work one day. I was in fact at a work meeting that this manager asked me to attend. This is not some misunderstanding. This is narrative control. That's how someone is shaping what's seen of you when you're not in the room. And this is really much more dangerous than a bad interaction. Narratives, they stick. And once you see that, everything changes. You're not going to win them over. There's nothing on earth you're going to do to change how they see you. And holding on to that hope is what keeps people stuck. There is no hope for a toxic manager. It's just a situation that you have to manage. And once you accept that, your behavior shifts. You can stop reacting and start operating. Reaction is emotional. Operation is controlled. Reaction is visible, where operation is quiet. So we can stop trying to fix the situation and focus more on protecting ourselves consistently, having clarity around conversations, documenting things for our own purposes, having expectations confirmed, not in a confrontational way because we can't win, but in simple follow-ups, summaries, and written conversation. Ambiguity is where narratives get rewritten. That's the mechanism, not big conflicts, small little reinterpretations. A detail is different, a delay becomes your unreliable, a question becomes your resistant. And this is how it happens, quietly, gradually, until one day you don't even recognize the version of yourself that's being described. So you've got to become extremely clean in how you operate. Short updates, clear timelines, visible progress, no excess emotion, and no loose ends. No assumptions. You don't give them easy angles. And something subtle starts to happen when they do this. They don't stop, but they will have less to work with. Less ambiguity means less narrative control. And that matters so much more than people think. Because most damage at work doesn't come from what you did. It comes from how it's described after. And if you're not controlling that, someone else is. And they're incented to make themselves look competent, which sometimes means making you look inconsistent. And this is what people miss. It's not about truth. It's all about interpretation. Because dealing with a toxic manager one-on-one is how people actually get trapped. Isolation is risk, so we can work to reduce it. We can work to make sure that other people see our work. Not loudly, not performatively, just enough visibility so your reputation doesn't depend on one person. Because if they're the only voice describing you, that's the version that sticks. And once it sticks, it's really hard to reverse. So we can build up other reference points. We can share our work with others and rely on others who have seen our output. Then the others can say, well, that feedback doesn't match what I've seen. And this is how we can create friction against a false narrative. Over time, this becomes leverage, and leverage is a whole new game. So this is power in the system, not in an obvious sense, not by title, but by protecting ourselves so no single person can define our narrative. Invisible people, invisible work don't get options. That's another rule. If no one sees your work except your toxic manager, you don't have a reputation, you have a bad dependency. And these dependencies are so fragile. Once you reduce dependency, you widen the surface area of your work. You make your contributions legible to more than one person. And now this system has multiple inputs, not just one. And that stabilizes you. Not completely, but enough. And here's something people don't realize unless it's affecting them. Toxic managers don't just impact your day-to-day experience. They shape your exit. They influence how you're talked about when you're not in the room. They affect references. They affect transfers and promotions. They affect whether your departure looks clean or complicated. And by the time you're actually leaving, most of that is already decided. So this isn't just about survival, it's about preserving future options. That's the real objective. And here's another uncomfortable truth. Even if you do all of this well, it can still push you to the edge because the structure itself, the system is broken. And no amount of personal optimization fixes a broken system. The situation did. It got to a point where staying wasn't sustainable for me, not because I failed, but because the system was misaligned and there was a huge difference. One is personal and the other is structural. You need to know which one you're dealing with because if it's the system, if it's the structure, the answer isn't to try harder. The answer is to leave well. But timing matters, execution matters, because leverage still matters on the way out. We shouldn't wait until we're at our breaking point. We should plan. By the time you feel desperate, your leverage is already pretty low. Your energy is low, your patience is gone, your thinking gets narrower because you're tired. Your options start to feel smaller than they are. And that's when people make bad exits. Fast decisions, reactive moves, burned bridges, missed opportunities. Not because they're careless, but because they waited too long to take the situation seriously. That's the pattern. So if you're in it now, understand the goal. It's not to win. You can't win against a toxic manager. They have the power and you don't. The goal is to stay intact long enough to leave on your own terms. This means controlling exposure, protecting performance, and managing that narrative. Not perfectly, it won't be perfect, just consistently, because consistency compounds. This will give you room to move, room to choose, and room to exit without damage. The real risk isn't working for a toxic manager. The real risk is letting them define your story when you're working for them, because that story is what follows you. That's what shows up in reference calls. Planning your next move is so important. A great place to start is with updating your resume. Check out the 6-figure resume audit. That's what shapes how future managers see you before you've even met them. That's the hidden cost. So no, you don't survive this by fighting harder or being difficult. You survive by becoming harder to damage, harder to isolate. And once you understand that, something starts to shift. You stop taking everything personally, you start seeing the patterns, and you start recognizing the incentives. You start operating inside the system instead of reacting to it. And that gives you a kind of calm, not comfort, clarity. Because now you know what matters and what doesn't. You know where to spend the energy and where not to. You know when to engage and when to disengage. That's control. And control is what most people lose first in these situations. Once you have that back, even a bad environment becomes manageable. Not good, not healthy, but kind of livable for a period of time in a temporary way. Something you move through, not something that defines you. And when you leave with your reputation intact, your options intact, your leverage intact. That's the win. Not fixing the manager, not changing the situation, exiting it without carrying the damage forward. That's the difference. And that's how work works.